And again, that was hopefully the most I'm going to talk all day. I would love to hear from you on this session as well as the next session. There'll be a lot of going over some stuff in the next session, but this is primarily kind of our pump the brakes a little bit, think about some stuff, and get some discussion from you guys. I did want to put out a couple of books. If you're a reader, I don't know how many of y'all are readers or not. This one has almost zero to do with technology, but it is one of the best parenting books that I've ever read. Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World. This was written in the 90s, I believe, and it's even more applicable today, if you can think about it, with the way that, the self-indulgent world is today. It's amazing. This is by Stephen Glenn and Jane Nelson. I'm sure you've heard of this book probably. Amazing stuff. Let's see here. There's a couple. Richard Fried. Boy, Richard Fried will blow you away. This is called Wired Child, Reclaiming Childhood in a Digital Age. Richard Fried just goes into all sorts of depth about all sorts of different topics with these. And I'll have these up here stacked so y'all can come and take a picture of them or whatever. But any of these reads is just amazing. It's well researched. He is probably the premier voice in like digital parenting circles right now. And so again, that's Wired Child by Richard Fried. Let's see here. I've got one by Jeremy Roberts. This is a gospel advocate book called Disconnect. It was a very good book talking about how to kind of just disconnect and do a couple different things differently when you're raising your child in a digital age. And so that's by the gospel advocate. I don't know if they're still like in business or not. Are they? Do you know anything about that, Isaac? I don't think they are, but I bet you could probably get this book from somewhere. But again, it's Dr. Jeremy Roberts. He put this together. And then, of course, there's two books that we'll stay in the brotherhood here. Drew Kaiser wrote one called Dangerous Playground. Very good. Very ominous looking play set there on the cover. But it's really good. It talks about, it's all about the advantages of social media, a lot what we're going to talk about, but also the disadvantages of social media and the biblical perspective behind that. And so Drew Kaiser's a good friend of mine. We have actually been intentionally put together on 2 or 3 like youth days and youth retreats to talk to kids about stuff. We've kind of gotten to know each other because he wrote this book and things like that. Really great stuff. Kathy Koch, Dr. Kathy Koch wrote one called Screens and Teens. This was done in the early 2010s. So I think it's about 2013, 2014, in the early days of the iPhone. But it's interesting to read this still because of the things that they were dealing with back then. And I say back then, like it's so long ago, but it might as well be a light year ago compared to what we're dealing with right now. But this is more about the fact of how it affects the psychology of our teens and what it's doing to them psychologically. And so again, to think about that, again, we didn't have to grow up with this stuff. So it's very interesting to see a generation of kids who are growing up with this. 2 books that I highly recommend, both by the same guy, Tony Reinke, 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You. Absolutely wonderful. This is, if there was a must read in this whole stack, it's probably this one. Because once you realize as the parent how your phone is changing you as an adult psychologically or changing us as a society, you will absolutely, hopefully get your kids to understand that. And so it's very, very interesting. The other one he wrote with a really good spin on it, and I've based my PM sermon on this book tonight called God, Technology, and the Christian Life. This is all about not just our relationship with our technology, but God's relationship to our technology. And then you may think, well, what kind of relationship does God have with our technology? Well, that's interesting. So I'm going to be talking about that tonight. So again, that's by Tony Reinke. And both of these books are incredibly good. So, did anything in the last session spark a question, a comment, a thought that you'd like to share with the group? Did I surprise you, shock you? Did you know all that stuff and you're just kind of like, what do you think? Give me a little bit of feedback on some of that. And what I have found is that when the more the talking does between the parents at these workshops, the more you will learn. Because one parent you may not be struggling with a certain thing, and the other parent is struggling with the same thing. So, what are some thoughts on some of the things you heard in the last session? 1 in 5 is pretty scary. It absolutely is, right? Don't be surprised. And have we reached that point where we're just kind of like not surprised by anything anymore? Isn't that crazy that we've become so desensitized that, on the news, we'll hear about a shooting or we'll hear about a natural disaster and we're like, and then we'll hear about, a kid got into trouble with this and an entire football team got dismissed because they shared nude pictures, which actually happened in Colorado several years ago. We hear stuff like that and we go, But what happens when our kids are involved in that? Because it's a possibility. You probably know somebody who has been impacted by something that their kids did on these phones. And you probably know that lesson that can be learned from that too. So that's a very interesting observation. What else?
I think we need to make sure that we're looking at these statistics as statistics that are affecting our children and affecting the church. And sometimes I think it's easy to look at those statistics and say, okay, well, that's everybody else. But reality, it's ours, and it's every single day. And whether or not we like to admit it, like they're struggling with it, or something they will struggle with, or we'll see. And we just have to make sure that we're willing to admit, like, it could happen to our children and does happen to our children, and be willing to push through that and support them in that.
So this is on his note. That's a little dramatic. This is a little dramatic to say, but I think one of the biggest lies that the devil can peddle to us, can whisper in our ears, is say that those statistics, that's not your kid. That's not you. You don't have to worry about that. That's not your concern, right? You're one of the worst things I think we can say is that I've got a good kid, and I know that because I've taught them well that way, right? Let me tell you, I'm not worried about what you've taught them. I'm worried about what the world is teaching them. And so again, that is one of those absolute things, is that we don't want our kids to become part of that statistic, do we? Very, very important for us. Good point. The social dilemma. I've titled this The Social Dilemma because I think we have seen over the past 7, 8, 9 years, well, basically ever since I started all of this stuff and Facebook started becoming really popular, Instagram, Twitter, all the big popular social networking apps and different things have become so much a part of our lives that there is a dilemma now for us on, are they good or are they bad for us? Let me pose that question to you here, open for discussion. Is social media good for us or is it bad for us? And I'm not talking about our kids. I'm just talking about us as adults. Is it good for us or is it bad for us? You personally bad. Okay, me too. I'll agree with you. Oh, the compare thing. Isn't that so bad? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Also, I think body shaming.
Body shaming is a huge thing.
Like to her point, in social media, you're seeing the very best spots. You're seeing the highlights of someone today. You're not seeing, hey, they just got home and their kid got in trouble at school. You're not seeing, hey, they got fired from their job or they found out their spouse was having an affair. You're seeing the very.
You're watching the sports center of their life, right? You're watching the highlights, right? You're seeing the best parts. Oh, this was my perfect meal that I made for my family. But you didn't see all the dirty dishes on the other side, right? And the blown up, pasta sauce up halfway up the wall, right? You didn't see that because I'm not putting that on Instagram, right? Isn't that amazing? That's the kind of impact that it's having on us. What else?
It can take away from your time with your family.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're just doing this. because it's like it feels like a vague, I don't know, I would not, let me disclaimer here. I would not condone gambling. I would not condone any of that kind of activity, disclaimer over, but it's like a slot machine, is it not? You just keep wanting to keep pull of that pull. And it's just, I'm going to pull to refresh. I'm going to see what's new. I'm going to see what's new. And some of us are addicted to different things, right? Some of us are addicted to a news app. Got to know what's going on. Some of us are addicted to stocks. Some of us are addicted to YouTube, right? Some of us are addicted to Instagram and all that stuff and seeing the other moms. And some of us are addicted to Facebook. We love to get in trouble, right? We love to get in the pot, stir it up, and then leave, right? You see people do that all the time, right? But why? Is it good for us or is it bad for us? Bad for you personally. Is there anything?
There's some good aspects of it.
Okay, what's the good aspects then?
Like recently, we had a member here that had a child that had an accident, and we were getting updates through some Facebook posts.
There you go.
Also, the things that she was saying about, how good our God is, and the people that are praying for them. So there are some good aspects in that matter.
The connections that I have been able to make.
And to be able to get the news quickly that, hey,
yeah,
something happened.
Right.
Whatever. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. It is. My wife just said something about that the other day. She said, I was thinking about a guy that I went on one date with in college. And I'm sitting there going, why are you thinking about a guy that you went on one date with? And of course, I was joking, of course, but she said, no, I was thinking about like some of the things I knew about him. And I wonder if he's okay. And turns out all she had to do was find him on Facebook and go, oh, it looks like he's fine. He has a wonderful wife and 2 little girls and everything is great. So, it's kind of neat to be able to see that and keep up. Here's a question for you. How would the people in the Bible, how would they have used this technology and social media specifically? How would they have used it? Would they have used it like us? Like we do every day? I know, right? Jesus would have had his own YouTube channel, right? Instead of just a few thousand people seeing it, we'd have a few billion people seeing. And it would be the same thing, right? There would be people, oh, that's fake news. They'd be saying that all and stuff like that. And they wouldn't believe it. Special effects, whatever. Yeah, it'd be the same kind of thing. But here's the thing. How would Paul the Apostle have used Twitter? What? Evangelism. How would do what now? You're kind of making my point for me. Because they would have used, I think the answer to that is the people in the Bible, I believe, Paul, and I don't think Jesus would have had social media. I'm not going to degrade him to I've got a Twitter account. I'm not going to do that, right? Because the Son of God, he's a little bit above social media, okay? But everybody else, I think about Paul, Peter, the apostles, Matthew. I think about all those guys and what they would have done having known the truth and the gospel and sharing it with this technology, what they would have done with this technology, they would have used it to glorify God in all things, would they not have? And I think we need to really kind of look at ourselves to do that same thing. We, as adults, we need to teach our children, if we are Christians, we are using this to glorify God in all things. Yes, this is an entertainment device. Yes, this is a communication device. Yes, you can do a lot of different things like play games on it. But you know what? First and foremost, your interactions with people must be seasoned with salt. They must be holy. They must be attentive. They must be serving first. They must be in all things love, right? And so again, when we think about that and we can teach our children that and embody that, that's some of those lessons that we can teach them, okay? So again, thinking about that in the context of social media. A few things, I think our own lack of knowledge about social media is a little bit dangerous. I think some of us look at it, and especially stuff that the kids use. And that's so weird for me to say as like a 41-year-old. Kids these days, right? I still think of myself as a kid, and that's wrong. That's probably wrong. I think every man probably thinks of himself as a kid until he's like, 75 or something. But anyway, our own lack of knowledge about social media may make us afraid of it. And I think about social media's negative influence, not just on our kids, but on our entire culture, on us as adults. And then I think we need to help our kids navigate social media, become responsible digital citizens. This is a picture. It was supposed to be a picture of my 11-year-old son, Jacob. He's not 11 in this picture, obviously. He's 11 now. But it was supposed to be of him. And then my middle child pops up from the back, okay? He was not supposed to be in the picture. But this is Jacob. This is the thing that they're in is a 120-gallon stock tank from Tractor Supply. Best little boy swimming pool in the summertime you've ever seen in your life. Okay. And Jacob is not like other little boys. Jacob is when he was 2 years old, when he had just turned 2 years old, we got that feeling as parents that something just wasn't really right. And you know how when your kid starts to get sick, you can kind of start your kids. When they're getting sick, you understand something's wrong and you kind of feel it coming and things like that. Well, we had that kind of feeling. My wife, more specifically, had that feeling. It was a mother's intuition. We took him to Vanderbilt. We had him tested, and it was very, very quickly that they said that they diagnosed him as being on the autism spectrum. He is not what they would call high functioning. He has a lot of cognitive delay. He has a lot of social delay, social interaction delay, kind of things like that. He doesn't understand social cues. He's very smart, very musical, very artistic. And he's absolutely wonderful. And he's doing absolutely wonderful. He is in 5th grade at Wentthorne Elementary in Murray County. And he has an aide with him during school, during the day, and he does absolutely wonderful. But the things that people have told us about Jacob over and over and over again, and there has been countless, hundreds of appointments with psychologists and behavioral specialists and different things like that we've done over the years. The one thing that they have told us repeatedly over and over and over again was because we were proactive with him. Because we got his diagnosis early. What they call it in autism circles is early intervention. The more early you can intervene, the better off that child's percentage of success tends to be. It's the same thing when we're talking about digital parenting. When we're talking about social media, when we're talking about technology in our kids' hands, if we can intervene, if we can teach them the right things from the get-go at the very earliest of ages, if we can be proactive and not reactive, it's going to make all the difference when they are 12 and 14, 16, and 18 years old. When we are talking about being reactive, you're going to always be behind the 8 ball. The power curve is here, and you're always going to be below the power curve if you're going to have a reactive kind of way of parenting. We've got to be proactive, okay? A couple of things about social media. I named this session The Social Dilemma because I think we have a little bit of a dilemma on our hands because there are good parts of social media, but there's a lot of bad to it as well. There's a lot of stuff, especially that our kids could get into that we wouldn't want them to be a part of. Have y'all seen the Netflix special, The Social Dilemma? That's why I named it this, okay? I think what was really funny about this is I think it came out in April of 2020, which was a very interesting time to put out something on social media. So it probably got buried in a lot of news and stuff, but it was still a big kind of deal. So it's on Netflix. I would invite you to go watch it. It's a lot about a lot of the people that worked on the apps, Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, people that worked at those companies. And they're giving you the kind of inside scoop on what they saw and what they dealt with and the different things that they went through. Now there is language in it, of course, because everything's got language in it these days, but it is incredibly eye-opening. And so when we think about that being a social dilemma for us, there is that dilemma on social media is great. Social media helps us communicate, helps us get news quicker. It helps us understand the world around us a little bit better, as long as, of course, it's truthful. Because I think I've seen, bless his heart, Morgan Freeman, I think I've seen him die on Facebook like 6 times now. When he actually passes away, y'all, nobody's going to believe it. Oh, Morgan Freeman passed. Nah, he didn't. Anyway, so what's wrong with social media? We kind of talked about that a little bit. Another point that we have to make and we have to think about, and we have to be a little bit kind of harsh about it, a little bit thick-skinned about this when we think about it. But social media does not have your child's best interests at heart. Just like the data companies that we talked about, none of these companies are thinking about your child and their safety. They're thinking about making money. They're thinking about getting their product out there to more people, getting more eyeballs, getting more interactivity, getting more clicks, therefore getting more data. And that's what it's all about, because data is king. They do not care about your child's best interests, nor yours. Okay? Privacy is an illusion. We talked about that before. Privacy is not something that exists on these devices, period. Apple can, and I love me some Apple stuff. I'm an Apple guy, but Apple can go and they can talk about privacy is our main concern and all this other stuff. They can blab and blab and blab about that. But if the privacy was really Apple's first concern, they wouldn't let Facebook be on their phones. Okay. So when they're saying that on one hand, and on the other hand, they're like, well, Facebook gives us billions of dollars a year. So, we're going to even look the other way when they violate rules and all sorts of stuff. Privacy on these devices is an illusion. It doesn't exist. One thing that changed the way that I look at it, and I think that when I've talked to kids, when I say this, it kind of clicks with some of them and they finally get it, I think, is that when we think about you're the product when you're on these devices, not the customer. If you go into a supermarket, you go into Walmart, you go into Target, you go into Kroger, you go into, what's it, Rex's Foodland? Is Rex's still down here? Brooks, what? I used to call did y'all ever hear me on the Forest football games at one point? I called Forest football games for a while, way back years ago, about probably 10 years ago. And Rex's Foodland, sponsoring this broadcast and stuff like that. So that's all I remember about that. But Brooks's Foodland, that's so weird. Okay, anyway. Do what now? It was on social media, so I missed it. That's what it was. But when we think about it, when you go into Brooks's Foodland down here, guess what? You're Brooks's customer. You're not their product. When you're scrolling Facebook or any of the other social networks out there, when you're answering your email inside Google Gmail that you don't pay for, you are the product, not the customer. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with using free Gmail and using free things like this but you are paying for it with your data. And when you get kids to understand that aspect and you say you are the product, not the customer to them, that really changes some things. Okay. Any thoughts on that? Any kind of feedback on that? I don't want to talk too much. What do you think about that?
You don't get anything for free. So anytime you're getting something for free, you have to think about what's actually driving the free inside of this.
And even when you're paying for something, you don't necessarily even get it fully for free, do you, these days, right? You could be paying for a streaming service, but it still has commercials on it, and you're getting the discounted rate, and they're still getting data from advertisers from you and things like that. They may not get very specific data or things like that, but so it's very interesting to think about. I think that when we look back on this time, I think we're going to look back on this time a lot like we look back on the 50s and people smoking cigarettes. Because remember, smoking cigarettes back in the day in the 50s and 60s, I mean, doctors would come in smoking a cigarette, right? They smoked on airplanes and stuff. And we look back on that and we think, well, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely insane that they would do that, right? And I think when we look back at the 2010s, 2020s, maybe even the 2030s, in 50 years, we're going to look back on it and go, how could we be so dumb and let them have every single shred of data that we have? People talk to me all the time. They say, I don't have one of them ladies in the tube in my house. I don't have one of them Alexas or whatever. I just said everybody's off on the live stream. I apologize. I don't have one of those things in my house because I don't want it to record me. Right. I said, well, how long have you had an iPhone? Well, I think I got the iPhone 3 or something back in 2010. I was like, well, you've had a microphone and a camera carrying around on your person for the last, 12 years, 13 years?
I had a conversation in my house. I didn't know Alexa was listening, but in a few minutes, an ad popped up on my phone of the conversation I was having with Alexa in the room.
And you know what's really funny about that? Is Alexa didn't have anything to do with it. You know why? Because your phone is so smart, and the app on it, the Facebook app on your phone is sucking every bit of data that it can, that it knows that if Skylar is looking for shower curtains and I'm looking for shower curtains, and it's going to put an ad, it's going to know that we're within the same, 25 feet of one another. It's going to piece all of this kind of stuff together. It's wild and crazy. They don't have to record what we're saying. They don't have to record what we're even typing. They know just by proximity and what we have searched and what we've looked at. It's absolutely crazy. And now Skylar wants to tell me what shower curtain I should get. No, go ahead, Skylar.
Searching for shower curtains today, then 6 months you're going to be on a floor mat to go with your shower curtains. That's how they do it.
It's going to be predicting that out. It knows that we're looking to put an addition on our house, and it knows that I've been searching for contractors. Well, I haven't found one that I really want yet, but it's already doing that, Skylar. It's already telling me and getting me to shop for different things adjacent to that, concrete and all sorts of different things, patio furniture, right? And things that it thinks that I want. I'm like, no, I'm not ready for that yet. You're not that smart. It's wild how much they know about us. And again, I don't say any of that stuff to you probably know all this kind of stuff. I don't say it to scare us. I say to inform you, because your kids are growing up in a world where this could get a lot worse. Do not even get me started about AI. Have you seen that stuff? I had it write me a lesson on Romans 12. I said, hey, just write me a lesson on Romans 12. And I'm sitting there 5 minutes later going, I might be out of a job. Okay, so real quick on AI, a little side note on AI here. I guess the thing that everybody would be most familiar with is ChatGPT. Okay, ChatGPT is basically, it looks just like a chat box, a Google search box, right? But you can talk to it as it is like it's a person. And you can say things like, write me a web page in HTML and CSS and make it have these colors and do this. And it'll put it out there for you. Write me a lesson on Romans 12 that's 3,000 words or less. Boom, and it'll write it right before your eyes. And this is a public beta kind of thing. And so if you look this kind of stuff up, it is kind of wild what this stuff can do. There are companies Microsoft just made a deal with ChatGPT to lock them in for the next 5 years for $10 billion. They are all in on this. Google is absolutely scared to death because they don't have an answer for this. They have been just riding their wave, kind of coasting along, and they haven't done any serious work on this. And so they're very scared of this kind of thing. Artificial intelligence. Yes, I'm sorry. AI, artificial intelligence. Sorry, didn't mean to say that. But there's what they're branding as AI now. A lot of companies will use that very loosely too. They'll say, oh, we have AI generated, help for your different, and it's not really AI. It's just a generative kind of search engine kind of thing. But ChatGPT is the real deal. And it's not even out of beta yet. I have a friend who is a professor at UT Martin, And I asked him that very question. I had dinner with him at Freed Hardeman Lectures, and I said, "Has anybody used ChatGPT to plagiarize a paper yet?" And he goes, "One person's done it." He's like, "I don't know how I was able to tell the difference, but it was just written a little bit too rigidly. It didn't sound like a person wrote it. It sounded like somebody was regurgitating the fact, but it was still," he said, "it was still difficult to kind of realize it in the time when I was reading it and proofreading it." I'm telling you, it's crazy. And this is just the first level of this kind of stuff. This is the kind of stuff that your kids are going to grow up. You know, if you have an elementary schooler right now in second, third grade, by the time they're in eighth grade, this is going to be normal thing. Go home and search on AI or go home and search on ChatGPT and get it to write you this, and then compare and contrast that with what you, I mean, they're going to have all sorts of stuff like that. We're going to be using artificial intelligence generators like that as commonly as we would use Google in probably the next 3 to 5 years. Because that's where the money is. There's new money in it, and it's the new thing. And yes, it can be scary because we haven't seen the first AI generated movie yet, but it's coming. You've seen all the AI generated art. The new filter on TikTok what's it called? The glamour filter or the childhood filter, whatever it's called, teen filter. You know how they're doing that? Artificial intelligence. They're figuring out what you would have looked like 20 years ago or something and putting that on your face. And it's staggeringly accurate. Yeah, somebody, I want to try it. Very nice. Yeah, it's kind of wild. How many people have heard of that? I mean, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But you don't have to scroll very far in TikTok and just to see somebody trying one out, and it like blows people's minds, you know. So
One good thing I can see on something like this, and maybe it's different, but the age progression for missing children, that is a helpful tool there to try to locate missing.
and the thing about it is, and I agree with you on that, and the thing about it is that any one of these tools, I mean, we've seen these things in the last 10 or 15 years. Any one of these tools can be perverted into something terrible. You agree with that? They can use it to militarize a group of people. They can use it to change elections and all sorts of different things like that. All sorts of different stuff that are true or not true, right? And so again, there's been a big. We're seeing it right now. The things that are progressing along the lines. This is kind of the natural progression of things. We're going to have to learn how to manage this stuff before it becomes a utility in our lives. Any comments on that before we kind of move on? I got some fun stuff for us to think about. Instead of all this doom and gloom about AI and I welcome our robot overlords and all sorts of stuff, right? This is some funny stuff, but it's also some very interesting stuff. I asked several years ago, I asked a group of kids, teenagers, they were about 14 to 18, what they thought of first when they thought of Facebook. What's the first thought in their mind? Just spell it, just yell it out to me. And this was at Graymere. And so a lot of these kids went to Columbia Academy, and then you've got some kids in public and private school. So there's a lot of different kinds of walks of life and things like that. So when I asked the kids, what do you think of, what was your first thing you think about Facebook? This is what the first kid said. That's where my dad goes to complain about stuff. And he wasn't wrong because I knew who his dad was. And I'm like, yep, you're absolutely right. But it's kind of sad though, right? That was his first, well, that's where my dad goes and just badmouths everybody that he can find. Ouch. Do our kids watch us? Do our kids watch us on our phones and what we say on our phones? How many of y'all think that teenagers and young adults in their 20s are not on Facebook? How many of y'all think that? Not on Facebook. How many think they just abandoned Facebook? It's not true at all. They're on Facebook. They're not interacting. And they say it's the old people. That's exactly right. They say it's the old people. Oh, that's just for old people, right? And that's one of these things that's going to come up next. One of these quotes from these kids is going to come up next. But really, they're watching everything that we do. It's kind of crazy. And we've got to be better examples. We in our 30s, 40s, 50s, we've got to be better examples on this. This kid said it's where my mom tags me in photos I don't want anybody to see. This was actually, this was in 2018 when I did this. He had just turned 18 and his mom had non-digital photos. This was the last time I remember hearing about a kid who had non-digital photos that they put in the graduation like slideshow. You can probably survey a bunch of youth ministers now and say that probably for the last several years, they have gotten no physical photos to scan or whatever, right? We've got kids that are never going to have those physical photos anymore. And that's just, again, difference in generations just by 10 or 20 years. Isn't that crazy? It's mainly for old people, this kid said, like my mom and my dad. Anybody want to take a guess at how old his mom and dad were at this time? They were like in their early 30s. They were like 33 and 34. I'm like, come on, kid. What? And then he says, and my grandpa writes on it in all caps. Now, why do older people tend to write on it in all caps? That was yelling that's the vernacular, right? It's like if you put it in all caps, that's yelling. You're yelling something, right? But why do old people do it? So they can see it, right? There's these tiny little screens and they got to see it and everything like that. It's so funny. My wife will post all sorts of pictures and everything. And there's one little old lady at Graymere. Every single time she gets on there, you'll see these string of comments. That's so cute. Oh, they're gorgeous. Wonderful looking boys. Wonderful boys. I love it. And it's so funny to see her comment in betwixt all of them. We've got a couple of older people at Graymere that accidentally, have you seen them hitting the live button by accident? We've got one of our old guys who the video keeps popping up every year on its anniversary for me because I liked it. And it's him recording his forehead for like 2 minutes. And his wife, he's arguing with his wife in the background. He had no idea that it was on, right? And we laugh at that, but that's going to be us in like 20 years. Let's be honest, right? We're going to be the ones like walking into walls and virtual reality and stuff. And the kids are going to be all laughing at us and everything. But think about that difference of that generation. Let's talk about Twitter for a second. Twitter is very interesting. Twitter has kind of gone by the wayside a little bit for some people with Elon, the whole Elon Musk thing and stuff like that. But kids really don't use it anymore. They tend to be on TikTok. They tend to be on TikTok, by the way, is the #1 social networking app in the world. It's growing faster than Instagram and Facebook and Twitter ever did. And so, again, that's one of those things we've got to make sure to look out for and police as much as we can. But you can fill in almost any social network that you want, fill in the blank here when these kids say this. Because I want you to hear what they're saying, read between the lines of what they're saying. Some of it's funny, but then you realize when reality sets in. It's the social network my parents don't know how to use. Now you think about that. I cannot stand Snapchat. I don't like what it stands for. I don't like how the app works. I don't like the creators of the app because they're a bunch of crooks. I don't like the company because they lie. But yet, kids, or the kids in their 20s at least, they love Snapchat. But I don't know how to use it. Think about that for a second. Where did you, when you were a teenager, on a Friday, when Friday night came rolling around, where did you want to hang out? The square, man. Were your parents there on the square? No, they were not, were they? If your parents were on the square, guess where you were going to be? Not on the square, right? Doesn't matter where. And it was Food Values parking lot in New Market, Alabama for me. And you know why? Because my parents weren't there. And what we have done in this generation is our kids have migrated that kind of mindset to a digital mindset. They tend to see, and again, kids are still on Facebook, especially in their young 20s, late teens, they're still on Facebook. But at the same time, the younger generation, 14 and below, they're never probably going to be on Facebook because that is the old person's network, right? Yeah.
You say you don't like Twitter, or whatever it was you don't know how to use Snapchat.
Mm-hmm.
If we allow our kids to have it, then we better learn how to use it.
Bingo.
But how can we monitor them?
Bingo.
We don't know what they're into.
If you allow your child, that's a great point to make, and thank you so much for making it. If we allow our children to be on a certain social network, we should be on that network with them. And it doesn't matter if we don't know how to operate that network. Doesn't matter if we get frustrated by it. But if we are the ones that allow them to be on there, we have to make sure that that should be one of your rules, is that I have to be your friend. I have to be able to see who you follow. I have to be able to all sorts of different things, especially when you're kind of wading into the first kinds of social media there. That's an excellent point to make. So again, kids are going to naturally gravitate to where their parents are not, but we have to make sure that if we allow our kids to be on those apps and services, then we need to be there with them. Any other comments on that? Yes, ma'am.
My nephew was in high school, private Christian school. He had Instagram. My sister wasn't on there. He was like, that's probably a post. So something came up. I was like, oh, what did he say? When his baseball friends got a hold of it, he posted a whole bunch of inappropriate things. Like, I called my sister immediately, like, if grandma sees this, we're in trouble. I sent her a picture, and she knew exactly who it was. They were up at the school within 30 minutes and had to take care of it. But she called me later, and I was like, I don't mean to be a tattletale, but I would want to know if that was my son. And she thanked me. She was on the app the next week, and nothing like that happened. I haven't had one with my daughter. My friend just happened to be on the same, she liked the same website that she was on. I don't know if it's Instagram.
So that brings up an interesting
She
question.
got that app got taken off immediately.
There you go. There you go. And there has to be consequences. You can't just go, well, don't do it again, and then give it right back to them. Don't do that. That brings up an interesting question, though. How do you react when someone comes to you, another parent, a teacher, and says, hey, this is what I found? How do you react? Because that's important, right? Not my child. My child would never do that. And then we go back to I've taught them better than that. I know that they wouldn't do that. Let me things that we forget sometimes as adults and as parents. They're kids. Kids are going to be kids. There's a reason why I think it's in Genesis 20, Genesis maybe 18, Genesis 20. When Moses writes that, he talks about Joseph. He says, Joseph, and being 17 years old, as if he was saying, no 17-year-old has made a great decision in the history of mankind, okay? So here's the story that I'm going to tell you about all the mistakes that he made. And he was redeemed in the end, of course. We know about that. We know all of his story and everything like that. But when we think about that and being 17 years old, our kids are going to make mistakes. They're going to be kids. We have to let them be kids. The only problem with them letting them be kids in this day and age is that they can sometimes make a decision on these phones that could irreparably harm their reputation for years to come, if not for the rest of their lives.
And a lot of people who are interviewing other people, they say, well, check out your Facebook. If you're in there for an interview, your prospective employer will look at those social media sites and see what kind of traffic you're putting on there, what kind of comments and how you act.
I could list any number of examples on that.
We do.
Lewisburg Electric, is that where you work? Why wouldn't you? Right?
There's an attorney, and the first thing she does,
Yeah.
she looks on her clients or whoever, and first thing she starts looking at her social media.
The big Ivy League schools, in fact, some of the bigger SEC schools I know, especially a prestigious school like Vanderbilt, they have an entire department of people that work on those things. They call them social excavators. Their whole job is to dig up dirt on prospective students that apply. And they're going to find it. And so it's kind of one of those things where if your child is one of those children that is going to go to a Harvard or to a Princeton or to a Vanderbilt or to a Stanford or even somewhere like Alabama or Mississippi State or UT Knoxville, you need to make sure that they've got everything that they're doing on social media is searchable and findable. For a long time, Library of Congress was cataloging every tweet, and They gave that up in 2017 because they said it was too much garbage and too many bots and too much spam on Twitter to keep doing that. They were going to catalog every tweet that everybody ever made. Our children are in undeserved fish bowls these days. They didn't want to be doing that, but again, the whole thing is moderation, letting your child have it later, 9th, 10th grade. In education is incredibly important. Yes, go ahead.
I think one thing that is challenging for us is, we're trying to teach our kids, if you're doing things different, then you're probably doing things right.
Absolutely.
And I don't have any social media. I got off of it all during COVID. I just couldn't stand
Yeah.
the goings on that was happening in 1996.
Same for me. Yeah.
Christians,
Mm-hmm.
plain Christians, saying
Mhm.
some things they were saying. And to your point about, is it being used as a tool for evangelism? That was the only thing I was really using it for. And after that point, I realized I think I could be more effective in other ways.
Mhm.
And so I got off of that. But I guess my comment is, if I'm not on it, and I didn't see that as a tool for me and my family, as something that I feel like I don't think I'm going to let my children get on that. And I will have a very solid reason why, because I want to be different from the world, and the world is running straight toward, this is the best thing, this is the best thing, this is the best thing. And I dare say social media has been used as probably like 10% probably for evangelism, maybe. So that means 90% of what's going on. I don't know these numbers to be exact. But,
Well, what is it really, though?
Right? Yeah. What is it?
What is it really? No, answer. I'm asking you. What is it really? It's entertainment.
No, I thought you were
That's-
talking about the percentage.
Right. You know, the percentage. No, I don't know what the percentage is. I'd love to know the percentage. Maybe like Dale Jenkins knows the percentage. He knows everything, I guess. But no, when you boil down what social media actually is, I mean, it's just entertainment. Now, granted, we may say, well, it helps me keep up with my, family and so, well, okay. But it's really just entertainment. And we can get entertainment from all sorts of other sources, can't we?
Well, I keep up with my family, but I just catch up with them when I actually talk to them.
Yeah.
I know everything that's already happened.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I tell my friends. I'm like, I really don't know what's happened the last 6 months. If it's distant friends, so like, tell me. Like I can actually have a conversation and not know what's happened the last 6 months. It's kind of nice.
We've got 3 other ministers at Graymere. And what's really interesting is we'll have a Tuesday staff meeting at 9:00 every Tuesday morning. And oftentimes I'll come in there and there will have been something that was seen or said on Facebook that they'll all 3 know about. And I have no idea. Because I just can't deal with it. Now, my wife has probably seen it because she sees literally everything on Facebook. She's like she has it embedded in her brain somehow, right? But at the same time, I'll sit there, well, you saw that on Facebook. No, I actually didn't. Well, how are you a tech guy and you're not on Facebook? Well, I don't, that's part of the thing being a tech guy. That's why I don't want to be on Facebook, right? And so, yeah, I completely see your argument. So there is a balance, though, there. What you and your spouse have got to figure out.
Well, to that point exactly, I think we all, the parable of the talents. We all have some very specific talents, and we have very specific weaknesses. So if we identify that, hey, this might be a stumbling block for me, and it's going to draw me away from.
It's a great point.
Others. It's going to cause me to maybe scroll when I shouldn't scroll and spend more time on my phone when I shouldn't, or get me upset and not be the Christian that I'm supposed to be.
That was mine. That was my deal. It was getting me so upset about something that I had zero control or influence over. I am not going to single-handedly, get on Facebook and put a little diatribe on there and everybody's going to like it and share it and say, oh, Chad solved the problem. Now we only got to talk about it no more. That's not what's going to happen. I'm just going to I'm throwing gas on the fire is what I'm doing. And for me, I said, well, you know what? If that's just for me personally, if it's one less person throwing gas on the fire, that's fine with me. See y'all later. And I just don't do it anymore. Now, that may not be the greatest solution, going cold turkey completely. But I'll on my computer, I will check Facebook once, twice a week. and that's it. Somebody else had their hand up? Nobody? I just imagine it. Okay. So all great discussion points and everything. Now, again, how do we translate this? You're translating it to your children by saying, I don't think I want them to have it at all. So let me ask you this, and I'm not trying to get on to you, but is that the right strategy for your children? Is that the right strategy for all children? Or what else are we looking at?
So at the City of Children, when we go to the City of Children, the kids are not allowed to be on social media because, quote unquote, they're property of the government. That's the terminology that they use. But every single one of the teenagers is on social media. They have fake names. They have accounts. They'll send you friend requests when you get back to the States, and you're like, who is this human? And then you click on the profile picture.
Yeah, I remember that actually.
So, to your question, is it right for everyone? That's a question. That's a conversation you have to have with all children, because the reality of it is, if we don't have those conversations and they don't understand the why, and they feel like we want what we can't have, and they're gonna find access to it. Whether
there you go,
their friend's phone, like you block it all on their phone, they're gonna get on their friend's phone and they're gonna create an account because they want it. They want to be accepted so bad. They want to be like everyone else. And so, the City of Children, they don't even have access to the internet most of the time. But when they go to the school, they just get on their friend's phone and they access it that way. So it's just one of those things that you have to have specific conversations and make sure that, you understand that even if you try to block all of it, they're going to find a way.
I had two parents walk up to me I think I was in Ohio actually, and they had twin daughters, 17 years old, and they were so proud. They were so proud. And they said, our daughters have never been on any type of social media. And I went, oh no. I said, where are they going to college? Yes, they've both been accepted to UNC Chapel Hill. And I said, oh, that's the kind of conversation you don't want to have, because you know that those girls have obviously seen things that what we've got to do. Let me back up a little bit. We've got to prepare our kids for the end. David Shannon talks about that in some of his talks. He talks about parenting with the end in mind. When does the end of your day-to-day influence come as a parent? When do you think? Never? No, I mean 24 hours a day, every single day, looking over their shoulder, waking them up in the morning. When does that kind of influence end? When they leave your home. Now, that doesn't matter if they go get a job or if they go to a technical school or if they go to college or whatever. That's when you're influence. So for all intents and purposes, anywhere between 18 and 22 years old is when that influence, that day-to-day, minute-by-minute influence is going to end. And so you've got to think about what you are doing to prepare your child for 18 years old. How many of y'all have 16, 17-year-olds in your homes? I don't want you to think that's scary, but it's right there.
I would even argue it's earlier than that.
And it is. It absolutely is.
Said when they leave your home, I'm thinking like elementary school, middle school. Like as soon as they step out of your home and they're not within your reach.
There's almost like it's almost like that huge long middle period, isn't it?
There's
Yeah.
so many other influences and so many other things that they are processing and trying to just take in. So it's far before they're 18. You still have lots of influence, but the more they're away, the more that
It's almost like it's almost like opposing curves. Your influence diminishes ever so slightly, and the world's and their friends and their associates and their workplace and their ball teams and all that stuff, that kind of grows.
There's a point where they stop caring as much about what mom and dad think, and they care a lot more about where their peers think. And so they may be sleeping at your home at night, but like they're caring so much more about teammates and classmates and what they're.
And that's so difficult. Man, I'm not looking forward to that.
I have a question. What would you suggest? We personally don't either have social media. So, in your opinion, is it more beneficial to allow it at some point? Or to just, we have our phone.
Neither one of our kids have phones,
But we have said we don't have it, so you won't have it. So is that dangerous to an extent, like you're saying when they get?
You don't want them to like what Peyton was saying. You don't want them to to seek out something that they want because they can't get it from you. So that like you said, like Peyton said, that conversation has to happen. Okay, well, if you want to be on this stuff, then we'll jump back on it with you. If you want to do that kind of thing, and we'll talk about it as mom and dad, and we'll make that decision together. And we're gonna let you have certain amount of hours on, I don't know, TikTok every week or whatever. But guess what? We're going to be on TikTok, and we're going to be watching who you follow and the videos that you've watched. And if we hear any curse words, guess what? Boom, it's gone. It's off. And so that there needs to be a certain set. You've got to have, again, that's part of that plan. I think that if I'm being honest, and this is such a tightrope to walk, if I'm being honest, I think it's almost just as dangerous to completely ignore it as it is to not, just to have a little bit of it. You know what I mean? There's always a delicate balance there. But at the same time, if your kid, and again, I'm talking about 16, 17, 8-year-olds. I'm not talking about 10-year-olds. Okay, here. I'm talking about older teenagers they're looking at colleges, that are getting ready to go to school and things like that. They need to be educated, because the last thing you want is for a kid to be 18 years old and to walk into his dormitory at UT Knoxville and go, I've not seen any of this, and to not be prepared for any of it mentally. Now, you can teach them in other ways. You don't have to have social media to teach them. You can teach them in other ways and other things and things like that, but that's just something that you're going to have to deal with. But there's a certain amount of exposure that they need to say, okay, this is something that I need to stay away from, and I know what it looks like. You know what I mean? I thought about that a lot as my kids are getting closer to the teen years, year by year. I think about what is going to be the right decision here, and really it boils down to every single kid. You may have a kid that has no desire whatsoever. I've talked to parents, their kids have zero desire to get on any kind of social media, and they have zero desire to be any part of that. But you know what? They're going to have a phone, and they're going to text, and they're going to do the GIFs, and they're going to do funny stuff, and they're going to do stuff like that. But they don't care nothing about social media. But I would say that's a minority. And what you're going to have is a lot with boys. It's going to be games. My kids, every single day, they're asking Roblox. Can I get on Roblox? No, you're not getting on Roblox, because Roblox is 13. But Dad, it's 5 years until I turn 13. Well, you know what? We'll have that discussion then. How about that? And so it's kind of that thing. For girls, though, if you understand, it's all about talking. It's all about communication. It's all about, and I'm not going to say gossip necessarily, but it's all about who's going out with who and all this other stuff, right? So again, that's going to be one of those things that has to be managed.
I think we haven't talked about social media, obviously, because I don't know if I would be to that extreme, because I think that it could be kid by kid. And
Yes.
I think it's almost more important we went to some other class similar to this, and they said you want your kids to make the mistakes when they're at home with you, and you can teach them how to work through that. So I think, while there will be some that, as of right now, I would say that will step up. But I also think it would be more important for me to teach them how to manage that, and then talk about how it's affecting you
Yes.
in your Christian walk. And if it is a stumbling block, then done, like you're not on it. But if you're able to do it and you can still be who you need to be as a Christian, then maybe it's okay for you.
Yeah.
I would add to that and say, like what you mentioned earlier, you're talking about formative ages, younger ages. Are you starting at that age, or are you going to turn them like you haven't been that parent that you needed to be up to that point? You notice at 16 with that at their disposal. So, I mean, if we do decide to make the decision ever, it will be because we feel like they are very solid in Christ, and that they know what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. If I had any doubt in my mind that what they were about to venture off into could pull them away, it won't be because I enabled it. It will be because they sought it out on their own, and they went and got it on their own. And it won't be because I'll be able to answer to God and say, I didn't lay that in front of them.
Right. Right. And I think the way that both of y'all are looking at it, I think that is almost 100% correct. From what I have seen, again, I don't have that personal experience quite yet because I don't have kids that old, But from what I have seen with parents that have all sorts of ends of the spectrum of different experiences that have come to me with how do I solve this or how to solve that. And sometimes I don't have answers for them because it's almost like, well, I've got a 17-year-old that won't listen to me and won't do this and everything. And it's like, well, I think you made the ultimate point though, about how it's, your child better than anybody else does. And you know what is going to affect them. You know what is going to be good for them. You know what is going to hurt them. You know all of those different factors. That really needs to play into your decision on what you allow them to have. And I would say, don't even think about any of this stuff before ninth grade. That age, you're talking about, you said formative years. The way that a young person's brain forms itself between 5th and 8th grade, they're finding that studies have been done on kids that have been introduced with social media, like just one social media, like Instagram, when they were in 5th and 6th grade, and how it has profoundly affected them through their high school years up into college. And the way that it affects our brains is just totally different from if you started in 6th grade versus if you started that in 9th or 10th grade. So I cannot overemphasize that enough, to make sure that you are starting this later in life, because those formative years. Now, granted, it's not even a great idea to start with a high schooler, but again, you're getting to that point where when we send kids off to college, they're going to have to be prepared to see some of that stuff. And it depends on how you teach them that. It's really important. Very good points. Anything to add to that? Any other comments?
Maybe the Amish are.
The Amish are onto something? Yeah, I think they are too. I think I'm just going to go live in a cabin at Walden Pond, right?
Every day I'm like, this is
I'm going to go find somewhere. I'm going to find that one city in West Virginia that has no cell phone signals or radio signals and just live there, right?
So, you were a military man.
Yeah.
I think as the church, we need to, kind of rally together and form a mission statement. Like, where are we heading with this? We need to create a culture, not just a set of rules. Being a Christian shouldn't be a list of all the things we don't do, rather a list of things we do. And so when you create that culture and people's fired up about it, then it's not so, nobody's looking, let's see what's going on. So that's why I think, y'all got a great thing going up here. A lot of people here, a lot of kids, a lot of people that can hold each other accountable.
I know this sounds cheesy, but I say it all the time to kids. When they're sitting inside of a church building, that's the strongest and best social network you could ever be a part of. There is no social network on this planet that can be built that's stronger than the church that Jesus Christ built and died for. And I know that sounds cheesy to say that, but at the same time, if we, and again, I'm going to step on my toes because I'm going to step on yours too. If we would stop being so worldly as parents and start acting like Jesus a little bit more, that would make kids see. And that would make our kids go, I'm going to think twice about all this stuff. And I think I'm going to act right on these things that I do. And I think I'm going to model what my parents are doing. We have to be the model parents first. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question as well about, you spent a lot of time talking about weight on social media and the importance of that. But what about just the phone in general?
Yeah.
Just being phone in general, would that be as important too, to wait until those older ages as well?
There's something psychological. It's a great question, by the way. There's something psychological about a child having their own device. And to me, of course, I have not reached that point yet with my kids. But when I do, there will be a certain understanding that there are a lot of rules with this device. First of all, it's not yours. Am I make myself clear about that? You're renting this from me. Aren't I great to let you have this and let you use it? Because I'm paying for it and I'm letting you use it. Okay. So that needs to be an understanding right up front, because when that gets understood, it's like, well, no, this is my dad's phone, not mine. When they understand that, and when we say that, it's not yours. And so that's kind of a psychological thing from upset. But when you think about, The great thing about these phones, and as we'll talk about here in the next session, which discussion has been phenomenal, by the way. Thank you very much for that. In the next session, we're going to talk about how you can make this phone do whatever you want it to do. You can make it be a dumb phone with a nice screen on it. You can make it be an only calling machine. You can make it only be calling and texting. You can make it only be calling and texting you if you want to. If you want to go that far, you can absolutely do that. There are certain apps and certain ways that you can control your child's device. And when they figure out exactly how much power that you have, they're more likely, in my expectation, they're more likely to respect that. Because when I say every night we have iPad time is from 6 to 7 p.m. and our Wi-Fi shuts off the internet for my kids. My kids have a little tablet that they can use, and it shuts off Wi-Fi to every single one of those tablets precisely at 7 o'clock. I can be in the yard and I can hear the weeping and gnashing of teeth when 7 p.m. rolls around. Oh, Daddy, the internet too bad. And it's like every night. Guys, every night this happens. Okay, let's go. Let's put your iPad to charge. Let's go get in the bathtub. It's time to go get ready for bed. And it happens every night. They still forget it every single night. But Daddy, I didn't get to save my game. Oh, that's too bad. Put your iPad in the charger. Let's go. It's just, it didn't matter. And so it's kind of that kind of same thing. When they realize how much control you have, what's really funny with my autistic 11-year-old son is I will say to him very frequently, you know that I can see everything that you do on your iPad. And he'll just kind of look at me like, you do? He won't say it, but he'll look at me like, okay, I'll think about that. When you exercise that kind of control, when you let your kids know that when you let them know, there's a psychological effect that happens when they know that you are watching. Psychologists said that they're something like 2 to 5 times less likely to do something or to seek out trouble if they know that you are regularly checking and watching. It's a psychological thing. I have heard it. I've sat on a mission trip. You talk about mission trips, City of Children. I've sat and heard kids talking in a corner with 2 phones on a mission trip, and one of them says, no, I can't do that. My dad looks at my phone. I can't do that. Sorry. It works. But guess what that means? That means you have to be very involved. And that means you have to be checked in. And that means every few days you're saying, hey, so let me see your phone. Okay, why were you watching this YouTube video? Okay, why were you following Killa Blood 27 on Twitter? Why are you following him? Stuff like that. For real, though. And having those hard discussions. Well, you know what? Why do you have 4 calculator apps on your phone? You're not some math whiz. What are you doing? You need to ask those questions. And so, again, it's all about having that. If you let them know that you're in control and that your expectation is you will be holy. That is what we're trying to work towards in this family. You will be holy. We will be holy as Christ is holy. That's what we're working for. That's hard to do too. It's an everyday battle. Great question. Did I answer that? I probably moved around it a lot. I'm so sorry. The short answer is there's no right age, obviously. And every kid's going to have a different maturity level. My middle child may never get a phone. He's tracking towards never getting one. Yeah, I know. And we thought about is giving them like an Apple Watch or something that they can talk to us, but it doesn't do anything else, And they're like, I'll get you a watch. I don't want a watch. I want a phone. I've got a second grader who's already is asking about a phone. And I'm like, sir, you need to put that on. You see that top shelf up there? You need to put that conversation way up there and just leave it there to gather dust for a couple of years because it ain't going to happen. Any other questions? No, he does not. Okay. We get in this thing as parents as we think, well, I got to stay in touch with my kids, right? You know what you can do? You can just be like, hey, I'm going to meet you here at a certain time. Like you're going to be out of soccer practice at 4:00. I'll be there 4:00, right? It's just, It's not hard, but we have taken, what's easy? Just to let them have it. That's easy. What's hard is to not let them have it. And to make them go home and say, okay, well, I've got a device at home. I got a Chromebook at home I can use. I got an iPad at home I can use. Do I want my child to be the last person in his class to get a phone? No, but I want him to be about the second to last, probably. You know what I mean? It's a very good question. Yes, sir.
Like we were telling each other earlier, not only being in control, but knowing that, when you give them a phone or not, but I tell you, you better know where your old phones are.
Yeah. When I talked about make a list of devices in your home, what I didn't say was that my 8-year-old at the time, again, autistic, incredibly smart, has found lots of loopholes around my security. Found a old Amazon tablet in a drawer, found a charger for it that worked for it, and charged it up, used it one day in his room. His door was open. I just didn't check on it. And he hadn't been looking up anything inappropriate either. But it was just like, what are you using? Like I walked in there and I was like, what are you using? And he tried to hide it from me. I'm like, and it was one of those things where he was caught red-handed and he had to have some. And so that kind of thing happens. Now, thankfully he didn't look at anything he wasn't supposed to, but we've got to police our own homes. And in the next session, we're going to talk about how exactly to do that with certain devices and such. Great question. Okay, anything else? Any other comments? We start at 6, right? Not 5. Okay, thank goodness, because I saw people walking up and I was like, oh no, I've got one more session. We got to get one more session in here. Okay, let's take a really quick break, about 3 or 4, 5 minutes, and just about 4:55, be back in here, please.